right. Hey, everybody. This is page 213, number 1 through 15 for the on-level students. Pre-AP, you're going to be doing 16 and 17, but it's not something I'm going to cover on the video because you'll be coming up with your own examples. This is subtracting integers by using models. So, number 1 says 7 minus 6. So I am starting with 7 positives because that's what I'm starting with, and it is telling me to remove 6. So I'm removing 6 of them, and I am left with 1. So my answer is 1. And a very nice person, very smart person asked me today, and several of you have also done this, asked me to speak up. So I'm trying to be louder. So if I'm too loud, I'm sorry. Okay, so question 2, I'm starting with 5 positives. It's telling me to take away 3 negatives, but I don't have any negatives to take away. So I have to add in 0 pairs. Remember, 1 positive plus 1 negative equals 0. So if I take my 5 and I add 0 to it, I still have 5. And add another 0, I still have 5. And add another 0, I still have 5. So whenever you add a 0 pair, you have not changed the value of it at all. It's perfectly legal. All right, now it's telling me I need to take away 3 negatives. So I'm going to take away my 3 negatives, and I'm left with 5 plus 3 positives. So 5 take away negative 3 is 8. Mind-boggling. All right, number 3, I'm starting with 6 positives, and then it tells me to take away 2 negatives. We actually did this one in our journal too. So I do not have any negatives to take away, so I'm going to add in 2 0 pairs. That's perfectly legal because as we learned up here and in class, adding a 0 to something does not change it. So now that I've added my 2 0 pairs, so I have 2 negatives, now I can take away my 2 negatives. Now, so these are gone. Okay, so now what am I left with? 8 positives. 6 take away negative 2 is 8. Did you get it? All right, pause the video, try number 4, see if you got it. Okay, number 4, I'm starting with 5 positives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm taking away 8 positives. How can I do that? I only have 5. I can't take away 8. I can take away 5, but I can't take away 8. Well, I'm going to add in 3 more 0 pairs so that I have 3 more negatives to take away. So I'm going to now take away my positive 8s. So these 3 positives are going away. These 5 positives are going away. So what am I left with? 3 negatives. That is my answer. So 5 take away 8 leaves negative 3. All right, number 5. I'm starting with 7 negatives, and it's telling me to take away 2 negatives. Well, I have plenty of negatives to take away, so I do not need any 0 pairs for this model. So I'm going to go ahead and take away my 2 negatives, and that leaves me with 5 negatives. That is the correct answer. Negative 7, take away negative 2. So I have 7 negatives, take away 2 negatives. I'm left with 5 negatives. Number 6, I'm starting with 7 negatives again. So I've drawn my 7 negatives, but now it's telling me to take away 3 positives. I don't have any positives, so I need to add in 3 0 pairs so that I can now have 3 positives to take away. So what am I left with? My first 7 negatives and 3 more negatives. I am left with 10 negatives, or negative 10. Number 7 is asking you to go back and look at exercise 2 and 3. And it says, how can you remove negative counters from a set of positive counters? You can't. You have to add in 0 pairs. So I wrote use 0 pairs. Then it asks, what is the net effect? The net effect is that we ended up with more positive counters on number 2 and 3. Our answer wound up being positive. Okay, next question, number 8 says refer to exercise 4. Exercise 4 is saying it was 5, take away 8 positives. We had to add in those 3 0 pairs. It says, how can you remove a greater number of positive counters from a smaller set of positive counters? And the way we did it was we used zero pairs. And the zero pairs give you more positives. The net effect is ending up with more negative counters because we're removing all those positives. Okay, the next part is a chart. And it gives you an example. If I start with -3 and I take away 1, and so I just showed that. I just drew it out here. I'm starting with 3 negative counters, and I want to take away 1 positive, but I don't have positives, so I need to do 1 zero pair. So now I'm going to take away that 1 positive, and I'm left with 4 negatives. And I'm looking to see which one of these other choices equals the same thing, equals -4. Well, I know that if I have 3 negatives and I add 1 more negative to it, that's going to give me -4, so that's why that one is circled. Okay, so now if I start with 2 negatives and I take away 9 positives, well, I feel like we're probably still in the drawing scale, so I started with my 2 negatives. I don't have 9 positives to take away, so I added in 9 zero pairs, and now I can take away my 9 positives. Taking those away, taking those away, taking those away, taking those away, and taking that one away. So what am I left with? My 2 original negatives and my 9 negatives left over from the zero pairs. So 2 negatives plus 9 negatives gives me 11 negatives. And that's what we're doing. 2 negatives plus 9 negatives gives me 11 negatives. This is the one that matches. Okay? Starting with -8, taking away 4 positives. So starting with -8, I don't have any positives to take away, so I added in 4 zero pairs. Now I can take away 4 positives. So what I'm now left with is 8 negatives, and then I'm going to add in 4 more negatives. So that's what this is. Starting with 8 negatives, adding in 4 more negatives. This is the match for it. Okay, starting with 6, take away -2. Okay, so we did this in your journal, and I'm sorry, we did it on the other page. It was number 3, and then we proved the answer was 8. So the choice that matches with that is this one, 6 plus 2. Okay, if we start with 5, take away -7, that's the same thing. So let's just envision it. See if we can do it without drawing. Starting with 5 positives. I can't take 7 negatives away when I start with 5 positives. So how do I do that? Right. I have to add in 7 zero pairs and take away all of those negatives. So I'm left with all 7 of the positives left over from here, plus these 5 positives. That's 5 positive plus 7 positives. That's the match. The answer to that is 12, positive 12. Okay, if I start with -1, and I'm going to take away 3 negatives. Okay, what I would have to do is add in 2 more zero pairs, take away 3 of those negatives. I would be taking away all the negatives, and that would leave me with positive 2, which is what the solution to -1 plus 3 is. Think Sign Wars, positive 2. Okay, if I start with 3 negatives, how can I take away 8 negatives? This one is actually, we did it in our math journal. The answer was 5. What is the match to it? -3 plus 8. 3 negative soldiers, 8 positive soldiers. Remember, same sign, add and keep, different sign, subtract. So you would subtract 8 minus 3 is 5. Take the sign of the larger army. Then you'll be exact. Okay, so that was 5. All right, let's look at number 15. It says study the pattern. So let's do that. Okay, here I'm starting with a negative, taking away a positive, and I'm left with a negative adding a negative. They changed the subtraction to adding, and they changed this from a positive to a negative. Okay, let's see if that pattern holds. Starting with a negative, starting with a negative. Changed it to adding, and changed this positive to a negative. Okay, starting with a negative, starting with a negative. Changed subtraction to adding, changed my positive integer to a negative integer. Same pattern. Starting with the same, changing the sign, the operation to addition, changing the sign of the integer to positive. Same pattern. Starting with the same answer, same addend, changing my operation sign to addition, changing the sign of my second addend from negative to positive. Okay, so same, change, change. Works for me. Keep, change, from subtraction to addition, change the sign of the integer. So what I'm seeing the pattern is they're keeping the first addend, changing it from subtraction to addition, and then changing the sign of the second integer. So let's see, to subtract an integer, to change the sign of the second integer, you're basically adding the opposite. So add the opposite. And then it says, test the rule by finding 3 minus a negative 2, two different ways using counters. So 3 minus a negative 2. Start with 3. I can't take away negative 2. I have to add in 2 zero pairs. Now I can take away my negatives. Take away my negatives. Okay, and I get 5. If I do that with my rule that I came up with, so I'm keeping my first addend, changing it, or instead of subtracting, I'm adding the opposite. The opposite of negative 2 is 2. And I showed that here with counters, and 3 plus 2 is also 5. So the rule we came up with works. 16 and 17, pre-AP, you will be responsible for doing that on your own. Y'all have a great weekend. Bye-bye.